In this chapter, we're going to examine a few key concepts in Git that will help you to better understand how it works. And the first of these is the three-tree architecture that it uses. Let's begin by looking at a typical two-tree architecture. This is what a lot of other version control systems use. We have a repository and a working copy, and those are our two trees. Now we call them trees because they represent a file structure, right? Our working copy begins with the top of our project directory, and below that might be 4 or 5 different folders that have a few files in them, maybe a few more folders. Each of those folders has a few more folders in it. And you can imagine that if you mapped it out, that each of those folders would then branch out like the branches of a tree. It's really a directory tree whose trunk begins with the root of our project. Now the repository also has a set of files in it. And when we want to move files between the repository or the working copy, we check out copies. That's the term that we use. We check it out from the repository into our working directory. And when we finish making our changes, we commit those changes back to the repository. Now the reason why they're two distinct trees is that these files don't have to be the same between them. If I check out copy from the repository, I make some changes into it, I save those changes on my hard drive. Now those changes are saved. They're permanent. They are saved in my working copy, but they're not yet committed to the repository. So my working copy looks different from the repository. Both are saved. It's not like I haven't saved the files. I've done that. They just aren't saved and tracked in the version control repository. Now, if the repository is a shared repository and there are many people working from it, they may commit their changes to the repository. And if I haven't checked out a copy recently to get those changes, then my working copy doesn't have their changes. So once again, the repository and the working trees will not have the same information in them. So that's a typical two-tree architecture. Git, however, uses a three-tree architecture. It still has the repository and the working copies, but in between is another tree, which is the staging index. Remember when we did our first commit in the last chapter, we didn't just do a commit, we did an add first. We added, then we committed. It was a two-step process. That add added our files to the staging index, and then from there, we committed to the repository. Now it is possible to go ahead and just commit directly to the repository and skip that staging step. We'll learn how to do that later. But it's important that you understand that this is part of the architecture of Git, and it's a really nice feature. Because what it means is that we can make changes to 10 different files in our working copy. And then we can say, all right, I'm ready to make a commit, but I don't want to commit all 10 of those. I just want to commit 5 of these as one change set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those on the staging index, add them to the staging index, get those 5 files ready to go, and as soon as I'm satisfied that they're ready, now I will commit those 5 files in one change set to the repository. The other 5 files are still saved in my working tree, but they never got added to the staging index or to the repository. They're sitting there waiting for me to make another commit to stage those changes and then commit them to the repository. And of course, we can pull things out of the repository in the same way. It's possible to pull them from the repository to the staging index, from the staging index to the working directory. Usually that's not what we do. Usually we go ahead and pull them straight from the repository down to the working directory. And in the process, the staging index will be updated too. We have our working copy where we have our changes that we've made and we've saved to our hard drive, but we have not yet committed them to the repository. We haven't told Git to make this a change set and to track it. Then we have the staging index, which is where we prepare things. We stage them for the commit. And then after they've been staged, we commit them to the repository so that they're permanently tracked and they now have a commit message attached to them.